Betrayal does something distinct in the brain. It differs sharply from ordinary disappointment. Neuroscience can now trace exactly why it cuts deeper. It lasts longer and resists the usual advice people offer afterward. Stoic philosophy addressed betrayal directly. The overlap with what brain research shows today is closer than most people expect. Researchers studying interpersonal betrayal found something specific. It activates regions associated with both physical pain and violated expectation simultaneously. This double activation matters a great deal. Ordinary disappointment activates disappointment circuitry alone. This includes missing a bus or losing a game. Betrayal activates that same circuitry. It also triggers a second system responsible for detecting broken trust specifically. This is why betrayal feels categorically different from other painful events entirely. Neurologically, betrayal actually is different. The trust detection system evolved for a very good reason. Early humans depended heavily on reliable alliances just to survive. A betrayal within the group carried life or death stakes. It was never just emotional discomfort. Modern betrayal rarely carries that same literal survival stake. This includes a lie from a friend, unfaithfulness from a partner, or dishonesty from a colleague. The ancient circuitry does not know the difference. It responds with the same intensity, regardless of the actual modern consequences. Epictetus addressed betrayal with a specific distinction. It initially sounds cold, but reveals itself as remarkably precise. He taught that other people's character and choices belong entirely to them. Expecting someone incapable of loyalty to somehow act loyally is not wisdom. It is a specific kind of self-inflicted disappointment. He was not excusing betrayal in any way. He was pointing something out instead. Demanding consistent trustworthiness from an untrustworthy person guarantees repeated pain, regardless of how many times you are surprised by the same pattern. This connects directly to something neuroscience calls prediction error specifically. The brain generates constant predictions about how people close to us will behave. These predictions rely on prior experience and stated values. When someone we trusted acts against those predictions, something happens. The resulting prediction error triggers an outsized emotional response, disproportionate to the practical size of the event itself. Betrayal essentially forces the brain to update an entire predictive model all at once. This explains why it feels so destabilizing, rather than merely disappointing. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that maps almost perfectly onto this modern mechanism, directly. He reminded himself repeatedly that people act according to their own nature. Being surprised by predictable human behavior reflects a flaw in expectation, not an unusual injustice in the world. This was not cynicism about people in general at all. It was a specific correction instead. It aimed at reducing the prediction error itself, adjusting the model in advance, rather than being repeatedly blindsided by it. Here is where the Stoic response becomes genuinely useful. It is more than just intellectually interesting. Neuroscience shows something useful here. Repeated exposure to an accurate, updated prediction gradually reduces the intensity of the emotional spike when similar events occur again. Researchers sometimes call this predictive recalibration. Applied to betrayal, this means something specific. It means consciously and honestly updating your model of an untrustworthy person, rather than clinging to an idealized version that keeps generating painful prediction errors. Seneca offered a related warning about a specific trap. Many people fall into it after betrayal. He wrote that nothing is more damaging to genuine judgment than anger. Anger convinces the mind it is thinking clearly, precisely when it is least capable of doing so. Betrayal frequently triggers exactly this kind of anger. Major decisions made in its immediate aftermath often need revisiting later, once the initial threat response has settled and clearer judgment becomes available again. There is a specific practice that emerges from combining both traditions into something usable today. First, allow the initial pain fully. Neuroscience confirms it is a real, legitimate signal, not an overreaction to be dismissed. Second, separate the specific action from a global verdict about your own worth. Betrayal reveals something about the other person's character far more than it reveals anything about you. Third, deliberately update your prediction model regarding that specific person. Base it on actual demonstrated behavior, not hoped-for potential. Fourth, delay major decisions until the initial threat response has genuinely settled. Do not act from the peak of the emotional spike itself. None of this argues for permanently distrusting everyone. It does not argue for abandoning vulnerability altogether either. Stoic philosophy never advocated for isolation as a form of protection. It argued specifically against one thing: repeated, willful blindness. That means expecting different behavior from someone who has already, reliably, shown you exactly who they are. Trust extended wisely remains entirely compatible with everything both traditions teach. It simply needs to rest on actual evidence, not hopeful assumption. Marcus Aurelius was betrayed by people close to him throughout his reign. This famously included a trusted general who attempted to seize his throne. He did not become someone who trusted no one afterward at all. He became someone whose trust was recalibrated by evidence, not driven by wishful expectation. Both ancient philosophy and modern neuroscience now agree this was never really about becoming cold. It was always about finally seeing clearly instead. Consider two people who each discover the same close friend has been lying to them for months. One immediately confronts the friend and ends the relationship in the heat of the moment. They spend the following weeks replaying the friendship from the beginning, searching every past memory for hidden signs of dishonesty they somehow missed. The other feels the same initial shock, but delays any major decision for several days. They then make a clear-eyed assessment based specifically on what actually happened, rather than on every memory the anger has now recolored. Neuroscience offers a useful explanation for why the first response, however understandable, often produces worse long-term outcomes. Strong emotional states measurably bias memory retrieval. Memories recalled during anger tend to skew more negative than the same memories would seem in a calmer state. This is not imagination. It is not exaggeration either. It is a documented feature of how emotional memory works. This means decisions made immediately after betrayal are often based on a distorted, artificially darkened version of the past, rather than an accurate one. Epictetus seemed to anticipate this exact distortion centuries before memory research existed. He repeatedly urged his students to examine an impression carefully before accepting it as true. This mattered especially for impressions arriving during moments of strong emotion. He was not asking anyone to suppress the anger. He was asking them to recognize anger as a temporary lens. That lens is capable of coloring everything viewed through it, rather than serving as a neutral, reliable source of final judgment about someone's entire character. The Stoic response to betrayal, examined this way, was never really about excusing wrongdoing or minimizing real harm. It was about ensuring that whatever response eventually followed came from clear sight, not from the distorted lens anger temporarily installs. Neuroscience can now measure this distinction precisely, tracking it in real time through changes in memory recall and emotional reactivity. Philosophy had already identified and named this exact pattern a very long time ago, using nothing more than careful observation, repeated across a single lifetime of watching how people actually behave under the weight of broken trust.